All right, listeners, are you ready to dive deep into a world of pure, delicious indulgence? Because today, we're talking butter.
Butter.
You sent in a treasure trove of info articles, recipes, tasting notes. You're clearly ready to become butter aficionados.
It's true what they say. Butter makes everything better.
And we're here to guide you on that journey. So before we get to the melt-in-your-mouth goodness, the flaky pastries, the sauces, we need to understand the fundamentals. Where does butter even come from?
It all starts with milk.
Okay.
Simple enough.
But not just any milk.
Uh-huh.
The quality, the sorts of that milk is crucial.
So we're not just talking about grabbing any old carton from the supermarket aisle.
Right. It impacts everything. The flavor, the color. Think about it. Those cows grazing on lush pastures, their diet rich in beta-carotene, that's what gives butter that gorgeous golden hue.
Ah, like a natural food coloring.
Exactly. And the journey from milk to butter is a fascinating transformation.
Really yummy.
First, you have to separate the cream, the fattiest part of the milk.
I'm picturing like a super-powered salad spinner for milk. Pretty much. It involves a centrifuge, spinning the milk at incredibly high speeds to force the cream to separate from the skim milk.
So those tiny fat molecules are clinging together for dear life.
Exactly. And once the cream is separated, it undergoes pasteurization, a heat treatment to eliminate harmful bacteria and ensure consistent flavor.
So finding truly raw cream butter is pretty rare these days, huh?
Very rare. We've come to prioritize safety and consistency, understandably, but it's also led to a resurgence of interest in those traditional methods.
Like we always seem to rediscover those old world techniques.
Exactly. And speaking of traditional techniques, we can't forget about cultured butter.
Oh yeah, cultured butter.
Mm.
What is it exactly and why is it so special?
Culturing involves adding specific bacteria, lactic acid bacteria, to the cream.
So it's kind of like adding a touch of controlled chaos.
You could say that these bacteria feast on the sugars in the cream, producing lactic acid, which gives cultured butter its characteristic tangy flavor.
Interesting. So it adds a whole other dimension to the butter.
Like a hidden flavor dimension almost?
But what happens next? So we've got our separated, pasteurized, maybe cultured cream. How do we get from there to the solid stick of butter we know and love?
That's where churning comes in.
Okay, I'm picturing a tiny butter churn.
Imagine the cream being vigorously agitated, almost like a washing machine on high speed. This forces the fat molecules to collide and clump together, eventually forming butter granules.
So a microscopic butter brawl?
You could say that. And as those butter granules form, another delicious byproduct emerges, buttermilk.
Buttermilk pancakes, anyone.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have our butter clumps, but it's still pretty wet, right? What happens to all that excess liquid?
That's where washing and kneading come in. Gently washing the butter to remove any lingering mothermilk, resulting in a smoother, less watery final product.
And this is where the salt might be added too,
Exactly. And the amount can vary widely depending on the intended use.
which is crucial for baking, right?
Absolutely. You can't just swap salted for unsalted without throwing off the balance of a recipe.
Okay, so we've journeyed from humble milk to a beautiful stick of butter.
We
But now you're standing in the dairy aisle, confronted with a dizzying array of choices. Grass-fed cultured, different butterfat percentages, salted, unsalted.
Mm.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It can be overwhelming.
So many options, so many
Mm.
possibilities. But how do we even begin to decipher all these butter variables? And more importantly, do they really make a difference when it comes to taste and texture?
That's the million-dollar question, and the answer is a resounding yes. But to understand the impact, we need to delve into the sensory world of butter.
I'm ready to unlock the secrets of butter.
Get ready for your butter senses to be awakened.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about the taste of butter, on its own, it's actually quite mild.
Huh. Interesting. I never really thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's not like biting into a tart lemon or a piece of rich dark chocolate.
Right. You think of butter as being rich and creamy, but not necessarily a distinct flavor.
Exactly. Our tongues are designed to detect those basic tastes. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter umami. But butter, especially unsalted butter, doesn't really hit any of those notes very strongly.
I guess I always associate the taste with things you add to butter, like salt or garlic or herbs.
It plays more of a supporting role, enhancing other flavors.
So while salted butter has a savory edge, the true magic of butter lies elsewhere.
Exactly. It's the aroma that truly captivates us.
That makes sense. You can instantly tell the difference between olive oil, peanut oil, and butter just by their scent.
Oh. Each cooking fat has its own unique aromatic profile, a symphony of volatile compounds that waft up to our noses and signal deliciousness.
Like freshly baked bread. You can practically smell it from blocks away.
Exactly. It triggers something primal, Those aromas just make your mouth water.
So what makes up butter's unique aroma?
Hundreds of aromatic compounds contribute to that complex, alluring scent.
Hundreds. Wow. Okay, so what are some of the key players in this butter aroma orchestra?
One of the most important is a compound called diacetyl.
Diacetyl, okay.
It's responsible for that classic buttery, creamy aroma we all know and love.
So diacetyl is like the lead violinist.
A perfect analogy. Diacetyl is also found in other dairy products like cheese and even some fermented beverages.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, so what else? What other instruments are in this butter orchestra?
Another interesting compound is butyric acid.
That sounds familiar.
It has a sharp, slightly cheesy aroma, and it's actually found in chocolate, too.
Ah, that's where I've heard it before.
It might explain why some people have such a strong reaction to it. Some love it, some not so much.
Yeah, butyric acid, the guest star with a bit of an acquired taste. So, I've read that some people can actually distinguish between different butters just by smelling them blindfolded.
It's true. Even among unsalted butters, there are subtle variations in those aromatic compounds.
No way.
Some butters might have a more pronounced grassy aroma, while others might have a hint of nuttiness.
Wow, so it's like a blind wine tasting, but for butter.
Exactly. It all comes down to the breed of cow, their diet, even the season.
I'm definitely adding that to my next dinner party. A blind butter tasting. Okay, so we've covered taste and aroma. But what about how those qualities change when we start cooking with butter?
That's where things get even more fascinating. Heat transforms butter's aroma in some truly remarkable ways.
I bet. So are we talking about like browned butter?
Exactly. Think about ghee or clarified butter.
Oh, those golden, nutty, intensely flavored powerhouses.
And that intense aroma is a direct result of browning those milk proteins during the clarification process.
So we're essentially removing the water and milk solids, right?
Exactly. Leaving behind pure butterfat with a concentrated flavor.
It's like concentrating the sunshine.
You could say that? And it's all thanks to the Maillard reaction, a complex chemical process that creates hundreds of new flavor compounds when sugars and amino acids are heated together.
So the Maillard reaction is the culinary magic behind all things browned and delicious.
Exactly.
What about when we use butter in less intense cooking methods, like sautéing onions?
Even then, butter's unique flavor profile interacts and harmonizes, creating a symphony of aromas in our dishes.
That's what makes butter so incredibly versatile.
From baking to sauces to simply melting a pat on warm toast, there's a perfect butter for every occasion.
Speaking of toast, have you ever noticed how butters come in different shades of yellow?
Of course, that beautiful range of yellow hues comes from beta-carotene, a pigment found in plants.
Beta-carotene, like in carrots.
Exactly. Cows that graze on fresh pasture consume more beta-carotene, which ends up in their milk fat, giving the butter a richer yellow color.
So that sunny yellow often means the cows were happily munching on green grass.
It's like a visual clue to the butter's origins and quality.
Okay, but does color actually impact the flavor?
While a vibrant yellow pat of butter might look more appealing on your breakfast table, color doesn't necessarily translate to a more intense flavor, especially in complex dishes where other ingredients dominate.
Right, it's more about aesthetics than flavor. Okay, so we've explored taste, aroma, and even the color of butter. Now what about texture?
You're absolutely right. Texture plays a huge role in how we perceive and enjoy butter.
So does a higher butterfat percentage mean better texture?
Well, here's the thing. The texture of butter is all about temperature.
Really? So like a stick of 85% butter won't necessarily feel different from an 80% butter at room temperature?
Not necessarily. It's more about how the butter behaves as it goes through different temperature ranges, from freezing to melting to browning.
Okay, so we're talking about the butter's journey through different temperatures.
Exactly. Each stage unlocks a new set of textural possibilities.
This is fascinating.
So let's take that stick of butter on a little temperature journey. At freezing, it's rock solid, just like that frozen water content.
Okay.
But as it warms up, it becomes cold butter, firm enough to slice, perfect for incorporating into flaky pastries.
Like croissants.
Then we reach room temperature, the sweet spot for spreading creaming and whipping air into cakes and frostings.
Room temperature butter is a baker's best friend.
As we continue to heat things up, the butter starts to melt, becoming the foundation for sauces and emulsions.
So far, so good.
But here's where things get tricky. Around 158 degrees Fahrenheit, butter on its own will completely split.
Oh no, separation anxiety.
Exactly. The fat, water, and proteins just can't stay happily blended at that temperature.
So what do?
We use other ingredients to help create stable emulsions, like flour in a roux, or milk and cheese in a Mornay sauce.
Right, to hold it all together.
Now, as the temperature climbs even higher, we reach the boiling point of water.
Okay.
That's when the water content in butter evaporates, creating those airy pockets we love in baked goods.
Ah, so that's the secret to light and fluffy biscuits and cakes.
Precisely. And finally, we reach the realm of clarification and browning, where we make ghee and clarified butter for high heat cooking.
So we're removing the milk solids, right?
Exactly, to create a fat that can withstand higher temperatures without burning.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, so back to baking. You mentioned that using a higher butterfat percentage does make a difference. Can you explain why?
Absolutely. When you choose an 85% butterfat butter over an 80% butterfat butter in baking, you're changing the ratio of fat to water in your recipe.
Right.
Even that 5% difference can have a significant impact on the final texture, leading to richer, more tender results.
So it's all about striking that perfect balance between moisture and richness.
And it's a reminder that even seemingly small choices can have a big impact on the final outcome in the kitchen.
Okay, so we've really explored a lot about butter today, from how it's made to the different factors that influence its taste and texture. But let's get back to that question we had at the beginning. Is expensive butter really worth it?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Based on everything we've discussed, I'd say generally yes, especially if you use butter often and you've started to appreciate those nuanced differences.
We're not talking about spending a fortune on butter, are we?
No, not at all. It's often just a matter of a few extra dollars. And when you think about how much milk it takes to produce a small amount of butter, it puts things in perspective.
That's true. Plus, those higher-end butters often source their milk more carefully.
Right, right. Sometimes from those happy grass-fed cows we mentioned, which can lead to a richer flavor and that beautiful golden color.
And the salt, too. Some artisanal butters use specific types of salt or have unique salting methods.
Absolutely. Which can definitely affect the taste. So it's not just about being a butter snob.
Right. It's about understanding that there are reasons why some butters might be pricier. But the takeaway here isn't about blindly buying the most expensive option.
It's about finding the right butter for you.
Your personal butter soulmate.
Exactly. For your cooking style, your taste preferences, the recipes you love. If you're a casual butter user, the standard supermarket butter might be perfectly fine.
But if you're like me and you really appreciate those subtle differences, then exploring those higher-end options can be a real treat.
Exactly. It's all about finding what you enjoy most.
Maybe try a side-by-side taste test with a few different varieties. See what you notice. Pay attention to the aroma, the texture, how it melts on your tongue.
And don't be afraid to experiment beyond the stick. Try making your own ghee, explore cultured butters, or even those flavored butters at your local farmer's market.
Oh, flavored butters. Those are a whole other world.
There's so much to explore in the world of butter.
So to our listener, embrace your inner butter enthusiast. Don't be afraid to experiment taste, explore, and find the butters that make your cooking sing.
And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to conduct your own butter experiments.
Now that's a fun idea.
What butter makes the best croissants? We need to find out.
The ultimate flaky pastry showdown. Well, listeners, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the wonderful world of butter. Thanks for joining us, and may your butter always be perfectly spreadable.